Okay. Good morning, everybody. Welcome to this fourth session. This session is on the priorities in post-plant resistance, crop architecture, and semiochemicals for pest and disease management. So, the host plant resistance is an important thing. The varieties which we had earlier, we are losing because we are going on prioritizing on the high yield quality only. It is equally important that we will search for resistance to pests and diseases, which is, I feel, being omitted most of the times in most of the crops. It's important we take a real look into this and find out how to integrate and make this component as a very important component in IPM modules which we are developing. The other important aspect is the crop architecture. This is very, very important in terms of tritrophic interactions. Already so many literature is available on the trophic interactions where the influence of varieties, especially the trichome density, glandular trichomes, the volatiles of crops, how they influence the predators and parasitoids. This is very important aspect which we had been doing earlier. Of course, now I also have one project on that. I am working on that. So it is very important to find out how this plant architecture influences the biological control agents. And not only that, how we can influence our plant breeders about this post-plant resistant as well as the crop architecture and its benefits in pest management. That is more important, and some places I have seen there are varieties developed with this kind of excellent architecture, which is again coming in the package of practices in some universities. So where they recommend if you want to have a BIPM module, so these are the varieties with crop architecture we have to look into it. And of course, semiochemicals. I am happy that semiochemicals is picking up now, right from the research started in the 1850s. Of course, now it has taken almost like 160 years. So now recently, we have already registered, of course, one of the companies have registered for the mating disruption formulation for Pectinophora gossypiella, and maybe in this season, maybe it will be available in the field. And of course, this session we will be looking into all these aspects. And of course, we have one lead lecture, Dr. B.K. Agarwala, Chairman of Tripura State Pollution Control Board. He will be giving a lecture on importance of host races of insect pests on agriculture importance. Then another keynote address. Of course, this we couldn't complete yesterday because of some reasons. So we will have this lecture from Dr. Agarwala. Then we have keynote address 1. Then 3 lead lectures, 4 lead lectures. Then we have almost like 8 oral presentations, then 2 virtual presentations. So before taking the sessions, I want to hear from our co-chairman and the reporters. If they have anything, I think they can share with me. So we welcome everybody who are with us. Dr. Agarwala is there, and all our co-chairman, and some of the dignitaries like Dr. Manjunath, who is also in virtual mode. So welcome all of you, and we will start the session. Before starting, if any comments are there from the co-chairman and others, please go ahead. Okay, our team says we will go ahead with the presentations. Then after that, they will reserve their comments. So we will start with Dr. B.K. Agarwala. He needs no introduction. An eminent biologist and entomologist. I still remember his papers on intraguild predations, a biocontrol expert. So now, presently, after serving in Tripura for more than 3 decades or 3.5 decades, now he is now the chairman of Tripura State Pollution Control Board. Welcome you, sir. Please go ahead.
Good morning, and thank you, Dr. Watson, Chairman of the session, and honorable guests who have joined us in the virtual mode. I'm ready to take your time in the fourth session. The paper was to be presented in the session only, which I was chairing, and I was running behind time, and therefore I skipped my presentation. Well, topic of paper is in consonance with the theme of fourth session, which is about the host plant resistance. And as Dr. very aptly pointed out, that in our urge to go for host plant resistance to pests and diseases, we are losing out some of the tolerant, more wild varieties. And therefore, we should be more selective in our selection of plant trees. Post traceage normally falls within the meaning of biosystematics, although does not fit very well with the classical taxonomy or species taxonomy. But then as you go down studying population of a species, then you find out that in nature, there are populations which react differently to different environmental conditions. Particularly all those insects, here we are talking about insects who are dependent on host and therefore are parasites. They encounter different environment in different places, in different times, and the agriculture is one such landscape that provides ever-changing and ever-spreading scenario for these insects to adapt to new situations. And therefore, the species taxonomy does not work here. What works is microtaxonomy, and that is study the population at the biological level. And when you study the population at the biological level, and that is where I say microtaxonomy, and in the sense of biosystematics, then you have species, many of them have a range of hosts to feed on, and there are genetic variation which is inherent in all the populations. But then many of these insects and so also other animals adapt to new host, then adopt new host, action of pleiotropic genes which are there in most of the species, and therefore can suppress the action of other genes and can take a new route of manifestation in new environment, and genetic change that can cause phenotypic changes. And phenotypic plasticity is a word which we have been using time and again to describe different kinds of forms within a population. So host traces ultimately are genetically differentiated sympatric populations and has to be considered as intermediate stage within a species along the speciation path. General concept or notion about the host trace formation, I will just brief it up. That here I will deal or consider host trace as the ecological population, and they are separated from the other population of a species, and therefore they are ecologically distinct and behave differently from similar other populations of the species. And therefore we say that it is a host associated or host specific population, and this phenomena is broadly now recognized as host-associated genetic differentiation, that is what is called as HAD. There are about 90,000 insect species, which constitute about 80%, 75%, 80% of the total animals. About 21,000 species are considered as minor or major pests on an average. And there are very beautiful account of host traces from different parts of the world. On an average, there are 4 host traces for each of these recognized pest species. And specialist species have fewer host traces than the general species. There are well written accounts for all these things. And HAD, host-associated genetic differentiated population, and that is the found host traces, have been recognized for 326 species on different hosts. These studies have been conducted worldwide on insects with sexual populations, and range some of the examples I am showing here. And there are insects about which I will be talking more. The aphids, which are asexual, and these are to be found across the insect class. Recognition method. How do we go about recognizing host traces? There are ecological methods, there are morphomatical methods, and there are genetic methods. But then, when we go for all these things, we need to be sure that we understand the population ecology very well. Until we are bound by our faith for classical taxonomy or molecular taxonomy, we may miss out the ecological preferences of the population. And therefore, there should be some conceptual clarity about the performance, the biological and ecological performance of any population, insects in particular. Insects in particular, because insects have short life cycle. They adapt quickly to any environment, they multiply very fast, and therefore they also undergo genetic changes at the same rate. And therefore, there are definite methods, now well-established methods to recognize host traces, and disease in the turf ultimately helps us to react differently from the control of pest management point of view. There are several studies by now where whether it is conservation method of control, that is use of natural remedies, or the chemical methods of control, whatever chemicals we apply, pheromones or pesticides, they all also behave or react differently to different, or the host traces react differently to different control methods. And therefore, it is important that when we try to talk of crop protection against some pest population, then we are sure that what kind of pest management it demands. So ecological methods require some laboratory study, and once we are sure that there are host traces in a particular area, and normally once host trace establishes in an area, then it continues to be there and it shows its preference. And ecological separation does not mean that there is effective isolation. As we say that define a species, we usually say species is a morphological unit, an ecological unit, and a genetic unit. But then, within morphological unit, if we do not take into account the linear concept of type concept, it is not typified. There are variations in morphological characters, so also variations the ecological niche. What we say, there are microecological niches, and that is where the host traces fits in microecological niches. And then the genetic unit, and therefore again, now that we have established protocols of DNA barcoding, genome sequencing, and we are able to find out the genetic differences in such host species. So, to the project of National Project on Insect Biosystematics, we had the chance to study some of the aphid populations in Northeast India, and the purpose was only to recognize the ecological populations or ecological barriers that exist in the nature and by which the populations of the same species are separated from each other. So Apis gossypii and Mysis persicii are two very well-known aphid species, and they occur asexually. Asexual populations of these species occur in most part of the Indian plains, and they are very polyphagous. Some of these populations are well-known pastic. It requires some greenhouse culture, and when you establish clonal population of these sexual populations, then it is easier to understand in a short time how similar or dissimilar they are. So, in a simple study on taro in Northeast India, taro is very common, wild varieties, so also the cultivated varieties. And we found that the populations on them behave very differently. Very differently, even from the external look, we get the inspiration that this population, although taxonomically looks alike in terms of certain important characters, but when it comes to behavior on the two different plants, they behave differently in terms of their development time, in terms of their growth rate, in terms of their reproduction fecundity. And therefore, when we went through their host plant transfer, we found that the population behave differently and will not return to their native host. It means the population which is transferred from the native host to the other host will not survive for long and will in fact perish. And therefore, we found that in the same area, within the same landscape, but on two different plant conditions, the population gets very different. Likewise, on two different plant species, heterogenetic is what wild brinjal. These are popular with the indigenous populations there, indigenous tribes there. Externally also, the aphid looks very different. Colonization pattern is very different. Habitats are also different. And when we found out the ecological behavior, the biological performance in terms of population, their growth rate, development time, generation time, was very different on different host plants. And the reciprocal host transfer result suggested that these two populations are really different and they deserve to be treated differently from the point of view of consideration of the population taxonomy. So we say that it is a wild brinjal Apis gossypii and that is a wild taro Apis gossypii. Across the heterogenic host plant, cotton, chili, and brinjal, and likewise, we continue to do like that on Apis gossypii. The results were almost similar, and we found that even within a small confine of Tripura, when collected populations from different habitats, morphologically alike and important unique characters, they behave very differently, and therefore could be considered they are different host species, and therefore our thinking is that, and now it is well established worldwide, there are host species which occur very widely. We need to recognize them, and we need to recognize to the extent that how these host species are important from the viewpoint of agriculture. In agriculture, as we consider that molecular taxonomy, barcoding, and gene markers, genome sequencing, and all kinds of things. But then in the field, what operates most is that how the insect population interact with the local conditions. And once we are able to recognize such interactions, then we can better deal with such populations. So also with the Mysis persicii, the three populations which we usually encounter is on the brinjal, potato, mustard. And they look very different. A well-trained taxonomist can say that from the outlook or external appearance that the population can be of majors, but then they are Persiki and they are different populations of the Persiki require some closure area. And that is where again the ecological performance on different host plants and even the morphometrics come out of the morphology and do the morphological morphometrics. And now that we have very robust statistical methods of discriminating the differences in morphometrics, the PCA analysis, the CV analysis, geometrical, and these things allow us to measure the differences at the population level, at the micro morphological level. And therefore, once we are cubed and recognize all these differences as it happens in nature, then we deal with the population more appropriately than what we know about them at the morphological level or even at the molecular level. At the molecular level, you have a situation of confusion that there are different DNA markers, so there are different gene prints. So how to go about them in the field as it happens? So you need that population behaves in a particular manner, and depending on their behavior, as Dr. Bhatt was talking about the semiochemicals, important chemicals at the molecular level. So it is the molecules of the plant and the molecules of the insects that ultimately interacts. And that becomes important. And you need to understand it not at the molecular level, rather at the higher level, where you can perceive it in the field itself and go about it. There are very beautiful accounts of such a study on the Mysis persicii viscosity in different parts of the world. And the results are the same, whether they are in Mexico, whether they are in Europe, in the greenhouse population, where the greenhouse culture cultivation is on a large scale. The result, even the plant volatiles. If you use the plant volatiles of the host plant, which is also the host plant of different population, then they also respond to the plant volatiles. How plant volatiles are important. Even without feeding on that plant, the volatiles itself influences the behavior of the insect. So these are the results. They have come from Turkey or Greece, and I will not explain these results because these are available in the print. They tell the same story that population as it exists in nature do not exist always as an interbreeding population. Even though they are sympatric, they behave differently, and there are barriers, environmental barriers, food plant barriers, and host plant is a wholesome environment to insect population. So there is no need that there is geographical isolation. So there is a very good study on the Mysis persicii, where the Mysis persicii was trained to feed on one plant species, that is the more established plant species, Vicia faba, and then allowed to feed on different plant species on which they were found in the nature. And then it was found out ultimately molecularly and also at the ecological level that the Mysis persicii remains original in their performance. In fact, they will react to their host plants. By Vicia faba training did not help the population to a customized. And therefore, one can say that changes in expression in response to host plants, indicating the importance of gene expression, and ultimately it comes to differences in ecological performance, which is the differential expression of gene. It happens through the enzymic pathway. Aphid-plant interaction. Research can be distinguished on the basis of gene expression, and higher numbers of differentially expressed genes are apparent between more diverse research. This expression differences between host research may result from genetic drift and reproductive isolation and possibly divergent selections. So several studies shown that HAD or the host research differ in their susceptibility to pest control methods, both conservative and chemicals, and therefore continuous evaluation of insect population and expanding and changing ecosystem is inevitable. And that is where I summarize whatever I could do through my students in Northeast India, species, and there are few more studies, but then I'll sum up with this by saying that there is a need to recognize this fact, and there is a need to evaluate such populations at the field level to say that yes, host places do exist. We need to respond to different host places in the manner they require our attention. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. Agarwal, sir. If anybody has any queries, questions, you can interact with him. You don't get him so often. This is an opportunity for you to make use of it. Please. Yes, sir. Dr. Nagesh.
Yes, sir. Good morning. Please.
This is something very interesting across the crops and very potential problem for aphids, especially from the vector diseases point of view. In that context, both the species are quite important. Quite important. What is the general reading of changing climate patterns and also post, population cropping patterns? One is climate change, and the second is population practices change. Has it impacted greatly on its economic value of biodiversity and the diversity? Because other dimension is the viruses, virus transmission, especially related viruses. So that is one of the things that we would like to know, that what climate changes, or is it stable? Populations are being stable across the seasonal changes, across cropping pattern changes, because let's say potential threats that are likely to happen, and spread of viruses, especially potato and other crops are very important, and brinjal and other crops. So that is one thing. Second is race versus viruleness nature. You say that if it's what, though they are parthenogenic, there is variation, and especially the post-related variations are there. So one is the hosts are also not host for the pest, but host for the virus. So what is the kind of transmittability and viruleness nature of these almost homologous populations, or homologous but heterologous in their expressions? So these are two of my questions.
Yes.
Not questions.
No. These are very good. Thank you.
Sorry, I elaborated the question.
Thank you, Dr. Nagesh. You have put across very pertinent questions. There are well-accounted results to suggest that once the population has adopted a host plant under a given condition, host plant itself provide a condition, and therefore the question from Dr. Nagesh was that how to recognize that host plant? Does it is in response to the climate change or the seasonality or all this thing? See that in nature, whatever happens and ultimately stabilizes takes its own course of time. And when I say the population, biology or ecology, at the taxonomy level, in fact, at the level of, as we say that it is a host-specific population of Apis gossypii or Myzus persicki, then definitely that process of natural phenomena of correlating, co-interacting, cohabiting, coexisting, and thereby establishing itself is a process of time. It is a phenomena that involves many steps. And once that has happened, that stability is there, and genetic expression has modulated itself, and therefore slight climate changes or differences in seasonality will not impact the insect population or the host pattern, plant pattern. Although to the agriculturist, a difference of 0.5 degree centigrade or smaller than that, or humidity changes, something may bring about some significant changes in the pattern of agriculture or the crop productivity. But to insects, normally they will not be that much labile. So once they have established themselves in a particular condition, they will like to continue and profess that behavior, and that is what we say is the microecological nichage. Ecological nichage is something, how do you profess yourself, conduct yourself in a given situation. So once the population on a wild taro or a wild brinjal or a cultivated brinjal or a particular variety of brinjal or to any situation, either in any part of Karnataka or in Tripura or anywhere else, has established itself over a period of time. Otherwise, it will not establish and it will not become a host race. To be able to call itself or establish itself as a distinct population as different from other population of the Apis gossypi, it has to run through the process of cohabiting and natural selection, a micro natural selection. The process of selection has to be gone through. Otherwise, that stability in the system, the physiological system, will not come and play into the actual field. And therefore, agriculturalist, my advice or my suggestion would be that population as it occurs in the nature in the form of host races, I am talking here particularly the host races, and there are multiple. The slight changes here and there may not be different, but yes, in the same geography or in different geography, I am talking of different geography, Karnataka versus say Northeast India, Karnataka versus say Haryana or Maharashtra or Himachal Pradesh. This is different geography. And in different geography, chances are that there are as many host races. So once you establish certain basic facts in the context, I would say context, in which certain populations, certain agricultural landscape exist, and naturally then you can go about theoretically thinking, because the biology happens through established phenomena of how the biology works over a period of time. And that is how the biology progresses, the natural population, that is what we say progresses. And therefore, it should be allowed to do that. And overnight changes in the agriculture pattern or the landscape should not be considered as the base or the stimulus for insect to adapt itself immediately. That is one thing. And regarding the virulence from the vector point of view, yes. As far as the carrier point of view is concerned, the carrier vectors is what to say, is anybody's guess that yes, as they move Vigus persicii or Apis gossypi, they are very well-known vectors, and they can always carry the vectors irrespective of the conditions and the plants. But the persistent vectors through the system will not be imbibed and will not be selected for by a population until the system is ready to adapt. So not to worry and not to react in panic. You have to be sure that the vector, it has become a vector of that virus in that situation. And that requires established facts. Theoretically, we must be guided by our own knowledge, intuition, that what should occur in nature and how best, what are the possibilities of it happening in the nature. And once our hypothesis is correct, chances are that we shall find out the facts quickly. And that is where I would say that nothing is so easy, but then we should also not ignore the fact that the things changes very fast. Insects are very smart, I would say, because asexual population in particular, parthenogenesis, they have a telescopic generation. So they have a baby mother within a mother, and baby mother has a micro baby mother. So a mother carries third generation insects, and therefore their rate of multiplication is very high. So the changes in the genetic profile, DNA changes are also very high. And we should keep all these factors in mind, and keeping the broad scale of what to say space and time, then we should develop a strategy. Scientists that I was telling in my first session, every student, every scientist should be so knowledgeable that they should be able to strategize the whole gamut of relationship as it exists in nature, in terms of host plant, in terms of insect population, in terms of weather factors and all these things. Once the clarity is there, chances are that we shall put ourselves in the right context, in the right position, and find out the facts more quickly and deal with it more appropriately than without these knowledgeable facts.
Get some clarification on you, sir.
Yes, use this mic. Those people in virtual, they will not able to.
And you have worked in Apis bursicae as well as in Mysis bursicae. So we have seen some color variations in Apis bursicae and the Mysis bursicae also. So how it is, this is the different horse races or due to the food which they are taking or maybe due to the climate. So how these color variations are there in this?
Color variation is more due to the immediate food they are taking in. So much of the color, life color, I would say, in the insect, particularly in sucking insects, either aphids or other sucking insects, do come from the pigments which are present in the food plant, and they immediately impact the life color of the population. And therefore, in Mysis bursicae, we have the pink population, we have the yellow population, we have the reddish yellow population. Yes, sometimes the host plant could be prevalently, prominently, or prevalently, I would say, have a particular dominance of a pigment, and therefore they will also influence the population characteristic. So life color may become important in such situations. But then life color is not always important in the recognition of host research. Color is something, size and color are the characters which should be least dependent for the purpose of recognition or distinction. In establishing the host research, I would say. So within a population, there may be color variation, and the color variation may be overlapping also. So until it is very patterned, and we know that certain food plants have a dominance of, say, xanthophyll or anthomycin or certain, which is 80% of the total pigments present over there, and rest of the pigments are subdominant, and therefore we can say that the pink is associated with that, because we also know that host plant have the dominance of it. Otherwise, when they are, we should not be dependent much on the life color.
Thank you, sir. Anybody?
So, when the same species assume to be polyphagous,
1 minute, Geeta.
the species which is polyphagous
adapts to the host volatiles and the nutrition. That itself is a big change for it to survive, reproduce, and establish. Would it be not too much for it to adapt in every way, say climatologically, or to the infections like the pathogens, or to other entomophages? Will the difference or the response will be that different? I think it should be. Even responses to pesticides, that will be more of a reaction to the host plant, the chemical interaction between the host plant chemicals and the pesticides, rather than the health of that particular race on the particular plant.
Yes, you are.
Transient stage, I mean, transient change.
Yes, yes, yeah. You are very correct in your saying that the specific population will not be quick to respond differently to different pesticidal actions or different kinds of things, because as I said earlier, that it requires a lot of inherent changes, intrinsic changes to be able to respond that much. Otherwise, slight changes here and there should not influence a scientist or a worker to take it that this population is also susceptible and or more susceptible or less susceptible to such situation. And therefore, I say that the knowledge is important, and the knowledge has to be practiced in the field. So such knowledge, and that therefore, purpose of such talk, such studies are that the knowledge has to be composite and it has to be carried to the field with the concept that certain things may happen, certain things are not likely to happen. This should be clear. And once the clarity is there, the chances are that we filter out the things which are not likely to happen, and therefore should not indulge in unnecessary studies. And so that is important. So yes, populations will react differently to different natural lineage, which are again established under certain conditions. So I say conservative control methods will require different treatment to different populations under conditions if that has established over a period of time. So also the chemicals. So DDT, if you apply, or BSC, or for that matter malathion and all these things, so malathion will work as it happens to a broad spectrum of insects. So leave alone the population within the species, we work across the insect taxa. So we should not expect the population to respond differently to malathion. But then yes, if you are very sure of certain concentration of malathion, certain situation in which it has to be applied, timing of this, the chances are that we are sure that what would do best in a given situation. So you should be sure as a pesticide scientist that what malathion, or malathion does not mean that anything malathion. Malathion means, or any pesticide, chemical pesticide means natural or artificial, that you need to be sure that concentration, the kind of relationship the insect population has developed in terms of its population buildup, in terms of its survivability, reproduction behavior, all these matters. In fact, that is where, in fact, in two, three of the seminars or lectures, I have emphasized on the role that in general, in India and also in most of the developing countries, so also in the developed world, I have seen that there is a tendency to go about spraying the pesticides in a given dose as suggested not by the scientists, but by the pesticide makers or distributors. And the farmers are not very clear about all these things. And that is where it becomes very important that can the knowledge percolate to that level through a sustained method, that how to discriminate and differentiate the concentration and the dilution of the pesticide and the timing of it. And let the farmers also, now the farmers are also upcoming, and even they may be literate in some cases. They can understand all these things because they are in close contact with the field and the insect population. And they can adapt to situation whereby they become a field scientist, in the sense that they know that how to apply a particular insecticide in a particular condition, a particular set of conditions. So that is where science becomes important. What to say, action of science, or science in action becomes important. That is what I would say. The science should be in action. So can we make the science or our knowledge active as it happens in the field?
Thank you, sir. If anybody has any queries, if no more queries, as an in-charge director of NBAR, we have the highest number of biosystematics in our institute. So I always emphasize, these are the things which are functional biosystematics. I think that we have to concentrate mostly on other insects. Of course, we have some projects. We have one project on Bemisia tabaci. Of course, we need so many studies on that, how in field, how the races evolve, how the races influence. I think these are the studies which we may have to concentrate. Thank you, Dr. Agarwala, for that excellent presentation. And I think he deserves a kind round of applause.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. So now we will go to the next lecture. It's by me. चेंज किया कलर Good morning, everybody. Dignitaries on the dais, on virtual mode, and all the participants. I just want to give an overview on the semiochemicals. Especially, I am trying to collate different information and what is the status of semiochemicals in pest management and what needs to be done. So I'm not going into the details of semiochemicals. So semiochemicals, as we know, is the chemicals which are emanated by one individual eliciting another response in another individuals. So again, we have further classification into pheromones, allelochemicals, so on. What is pheromone? Pheromone is intraspecific. So we have different types of pheromones. Of course, in pest management, we use only very importantly two. One is the sex pheromone, the other is aggregation pheromone. Sex pheromone is, as I mentioned, a female releases some chemicals, usually from the abdominal glands, and it elicits a response in the males, and males will come and mate. The other one is the aggregation pheromone, which we see mostly on the coleopterans, as well as in some of the hemipteral bugs. So this is usually from the thoracic gland secretions. Here it attracts both males and females. Both of them come together and mate, and they start their life. So as I told you, in 1823 or somewhere in 1850, Faber was the first one to show that females attract males, especially in Saturnia. He did very small experiment. He just put the females in a small cage and left on his corridor. Then within a few minutes, he found so many males were attracted. And that was a great scientific discovery, it seems. Those periods, so many people came to see how the males are attracted. So that was the initial study on pheromones. Of course, not much of chemistry was known till 1959, when all the persons, all the scientists went to Dr. Boutant. He was the person who got Nobel Prize in the discovery of some in chemistry on the pharmacology system. And then they requested him to find out, can you work on the identification of pheromones so that it can be used in pest management. So the idea is to use in the pest management. So that came the Babica, the pheromone for the Bombyx mori. Then after that, the term pheromone was earlier not there. It was known as ectohormone. Then later it was termed as pheromone. So already pheromone I have told on what is the allelochemicals. There are chiromones which elicit a response in the receiver. The benefit is for the receiver, not for the emitter. We call it as chiromone. And if the benefit is for both the emitter as well as the receiver, we call it as cynomone. And of course, if the benefit is only for the releaser, we call it as allomone. So in this picture, I have just So that we call it as alomone. So this already I have mentioned. People always ask me, what is a pheromone or what is the chemistry of pheromone? I always say 5 thumb rules. One is the number of carbon atoms. So the name refers to the number of carbon atoms present in the pheromone. Suppose, for example, if it is dodecane, it refers to anybody? 12 carbon atom. If it is tetra, it is 14, like that. Then the second rule is the functional group, which is the last word you see. So I have already given example of helicoverpa pheromone. You can see Z11 hexadecinal. The hexadeci is 16 carbon, and the Al that refers to aldehyde group. It may be aldehyde, alcohol, acid, esters, all the possibilities are there. Then the double bond, the position of double bond and the geometric isomerism. So in this example, I have already given is at 11. 11 refers to the presence of the carbon atom in which the isomerism is existing, the double bond is existing. And again, if the isomer is this side, left side, within the circle or outside the carbon atom. So that refers to E or Z, and we call it as antigen, and the antigen is refers to E, and the Josephson refers to Z. And sometimes the composition of minor and major compound, that is also very important. In this case, I have already mentioned the helicoverpa pheromone is 2 components, so Z11 and Z9 hexadecinal. The ratio is 97:3. And if you go the same thing in the case of other species, Helicoverpa asalta, it is exactly ulta. It is 3:97. So they develop in such a way that they are species specific. Pheromones are going to be species specific. For that, the blends are very, very important. Once we know the pheromones, and we need dispensers to keep it in the field. So there are different types of dispensers, septa, rubber septa, which most of you may be using, rubber tubes, and wooden pieces which we use for the parapheromones like methyluginol. And again, some companies have brought out with a kind of bottle delivery, like something like your mosquito repellent you have. And again, PV rope is because some of the things are used for high content of pheromone. For that, they use PV rope, which is having almost like 160 milligram. Usually, the septa will have only 2 to 3 milligram. And again, there are formulations which are known as plat. This here it is something like an edible gum impregnated with the pheromone. This is used for mating distribution. So the dispensers are meant only to allow the slow and the sustained release of pheromone, which is also almost equivalent to the pheromone released by the females. So if you don't simulate that, I think we will not be able to have any catches. So for that, we use the dispensers so that the releases are almost equivalent to the release by a female in the field. So once we achieve that, the pheromone capture is very easy. Of course, the traps, which you, depending on the behavior of the insect, we use different. So like fly water trap, which is plastic moth trap, funnel trap, sleeve trap. So delta trap, now delta trap also picking up, there are different modifications, delta traps with small holes to allow more of moths. Those kind of things are going on. Then again, fruit fly trap, bucket trap is for very bigger insects like Oryctes and Rhynchophorus. So what are the uses? Pheromones generally we use for monitoring, mass trapping, mating disruption, and sometimes for male annihilation. So in the monitoring, it's very, very important because quarantine monitoring is picking up so much. So European Union in 2015 wanted to ban all the import from India, all the produce from India, because of one reason. They said all these have insects, especially thrips and flies. So then the ICAR, the Department of Agriculture, they had to fight out and show that there is no danger of importing this produce from India, and finally that was revoked. So the quarantine, the countries, especially some countries, are very, very sensitive to the introduction of new insects. So they use these pheromones as an excellent tool for monitoring the insects, including invasives. So the best example already I have given, Bactrocera invadens, which is also known as the Dorsalis, and again Ceratophrys capitata. These are very notorious insects which all the countries want to have a watchdog. So what they do is they keep it in wherever the importation of produce happens, and the small traps, 1 or 2 traps. So immediately, as soon as one fly has got also, they have an alarming system, a pest alert system. They inform all the developmental officials that there is the pest incident, and immediately they go for action like taking out more of traps and try to get it and kill it. So this is very, very important. So we also have to develop that kind of systems. So this already I have mentioned. So when you say for monitoring in India and other countries, they are using very effectively, even for apart from the fruit flies, we also use it. And also there are so many studies which has proved that the correlation between the field studies as well as the monitoring. Suppose if I get a moth here, Helicoverpa, I can predict in how many days there will be a larval population. What kind of predictions have already been done? So based on that, we can anticipate what are the practices we have to take. Maybe we can go for release of biocontrol agents, or even to limited spraying so that the pest is contained. So these are some of the examples. So in Australia, they started using the same pheromone for a different purpose. Australia is very maybe the pioneer in the introduction of insect, especially the weed insects, for killing the weeds, different species of weeds, because they go for sustained management of weeds through the introduction of insects. So for that, what they have started doing is they will start identify the pheromone and go on using the pheromone to monitor the spread of the weed killer to different regions. Suppose if they release, say for example here, they go on monitoring using the pheromones to different places so that they document in a given period of time how the pest has gone into different places. So they already have done for this kind of species, which already have mentioned. Juvida is for the Eichhornia, and the Agapetha is for the Centuria, and Carmenta is for the Mimosa. So these pheromones are already available, and they are trying to use them for monitoring the spread of these weed killer insects. This is very interesting. In US, they train dogs, our own golden retriever dogs. They are very docile dogs and very intelligent dogs. So from the baby stage, they go on exposing to the pheromones. So when they are tuned to the pheromone, once they take them to the field, they will be able to identify the branch where the female is sitting and releasing the pheromone. So after that, they just clip up, and maybe they want to release Cryptolimus or Anagarus, they go on doing leptomastics, they do it. So this is an effective tool they are using, dogs, for identifying the pest incidents. So as I already told, I have told you this aggregation pheromone is the other one, which we use for mostly the mass trapping. So here, these are the chemicals which are already identified, and we use it for mass trapping. It's very effective. But only one issue always I will get about is especially for the rhynchophorus. Once we have used and I find that the incidence is becoming more due to pheromone. When we give in that bucket trap, we also tell them to use a kind of uh, feed and kill, because there will be some poison baited with either sugarcane seeds or some jaggery or like that. So once the adults are coming and landing on the bucket, they are supposed to bite and they will be killed. So what happens is after 15 days, the poison will lose its power. So the adults will be coming, but they will not be killed. In that case, what we say is you have to do servicing. Servicing is very important. Pheromone may be there for almost 2 months in the field, but servicing you have to do every 15 days. Unless you do that, you will see the whole incidence becoming more. So servicing is very important when we use aggregation pheromone, especially for this Rhynchophorus and Oryctes rhinoceros. So these are some of the examples which already are available. So this is the other aspect, mating disruption. Here what we do is we inundate the field with the pheromone smell. Once the smell of pheromone is there, the insect is unable to locate their males. So they just go on spending to trade because they get the pheromone, but they are unable to locate the females. So in that process, they go on spending more of energy and finally they become fatigue and die. So this concept, we are trying to use it. So these are our earlier studies. Suppose the difference between monitoring mass trapping and mating disruption is only depending on the quantity of pheromone used per hectare. Suppose if we use only 3 milligram or maybe 2-3 traps, 6 milligram per hectare, it is only monitoring. Suppose we use say 30 to 45 milligram per hectare, it becomes mass trapping. Suppose if we are going to use about 8 to 10 grams, it becomes mating disruption. So different studies have been done earlier also in India. So this is very successful that Pectinophora gossypiella, I think friends from Maharashtra and Gujarat, they know about it. There are TB ropes, which is from an imported chemical. One company is trying to promote it. So in this, it has about 160 milligram per rope of pheromone per rope, and they have to tie it like that, what I have mentioned here. So this is the picture. So this is where we are trying to do it. So of course, these are different formulations developed and abroad, and they are being used effectively. So here they have told, of course, this is not from India. So they use different formulations, and they have made a comparison and say this cost may be almost like say 7,000 or say 8,000 rupees only they have to spend. So in India, we have also, as I already mentioned, so we have one formulation which is known as the splat. You can see a black spot here. This black spot is a gum. It is supposed to be an edible gum impregnated with the pheromone. So what we do is when we go on transplanting the Lucinodes, especially the brinjal plant, immediately we ask the farmers to go and apply this pheromone in the field. So depending on the crop we use, maybe 400 to 500 spots we use, and we have got excellent result in terms of Pectinophora, and again methyluginol we use along with the female attractant, Tuta and the Lucinodes. All these four we have successfully proved that we can manage even without a single spray of insecticide, or maybe maximum you need one spray of insecticide. So this product is already been formalized, and it is going to be available in the field soon. Maybe this year itself it may be available. So we also have another pheromone nanospencer, which is developed by Dr. Subhagaran for the Tuta absoluta. So this also we have used for mass trapping. So you can see how many numbers you have got. This is already we have commercialized. This is the splat which already I have mentioned we have used in tomato, mango, and brinjal. So what is the advantage of using mating disruption technology? It is you can reduce the insecticide, as already we have mentioned. the farmers in Gujarat and Maharashtra were fed up with spraying insecticide for Pectinophora gazpaella. So they are now very happy after this mating deception have been shown to them. And again, insecticide resistant populations, it is easy to use with the mating deception. Of course, I don't need to say it is eco-friendly because we are not going to apply any insecticide, even if it is needed maybe 1 or 2 only. And we have already seen wherever we have used for the cotton, the population of predators is increasing, unlike the spray of insecticide. And of course, we can merge this technology with any biocontrol method. You can apply BT, you can apply virus, you can release the parasites, you can, well, in fact, in Pectinophora, we always advocate release of trichogramma along with the mating deception. If initially start with mating deception and go for Pectinophora, go for trichogramma releases. Of course, there are some limitations. So sometimes all the insects do not respond to mating deception. So we have this problem. And one thing is, if you have a very small plot, we don't advocate. If you have very larger area, it is working very nicely. And again, we suggest that it should be in the village level. So instead of doing one farmer in isolation, let them take the whole village into support and do at village level. The effect will be very nice. So you can see within 2-3 years, the population comes down drastically. So then one question they always say, because we are using high quantity of pheromone, is there any chances of developing resistance? This already we have seen that if you use all the blends in the pheromone formulations which we are using, the chances of developing resistance is very low. But if you use only one component, there is possibility that it develops resistance. Always we suggest use all the combination, all the major and minor components, compounds in the pheromone formulation. So this is the male annihilation technique, which is already popularized in even here also I have seen some studies on that. So if you see the mango fruit fly, they respond to parapheromone. So why we call it as a parapheromone is methyl-eugenol is not from the insect origin, it is from the plant origin. So we call it as a parapheromone. So luckily they respond to different parapheromones. This is the one example is Bactrocera dorsalis. So maybe here I used to see very much infestation in the guava plant. So here, especially it goes along with the food habit. So in the southern places, we don't allow the guava to be ripened. But here, especially in North India, we allow to ripen and eat. So whenever we allow to ripen, or even the mango, when we allow the natural ripening, we found the infestation by fruit fly is very high. So here, the damage is very high. And again, guava, especially now the Taiwan rose is one variety, which I think you should have seen in the supermarkets. It is fetching almost like 100 and 220 rupees per kg. And one fruit will be almost like 300 to 400 grams. So the farmers are getting very good benefit with that. So they want to use this. And another thing is the Bactrocera cucurbitae. This is already in this place also is very big serious issue. So luckily fruit flies use distinctive parapheromones. Methyl-eugenol is used by Bactrocera dorsalis group, and Q-lure is used by Bactrocera cucurbitae group. And of course, the trimud-lure of India, we say Ceratizia has not come. So maybe it has come also, we don't know. But as far as the records are available, we will say we are free from Ceratizia capitata. So trimud-lure is for the Ceratizia capitata. So when we use for methyl annihilation, earlier I told for monitoring, here we use for methyl annihilation. We have developed wooden lures, which is our Dr. Varghese work, and 10 per acre we recommend. And again, for Q-lure, we use almost like 20 traps. And along with that, we also recommend spraying of proteinous spray mixture. And of course, we have developed one formulation in our institute. So this is a combination of methyl-eugenol with some other volatiles, which we already asked for patent. So this is attracting more than 2.5 times than the methyl-eugenol alone. So in the next slide, I will be showing how much we have got. So this also we are trying to improve the formulations. We have already developed a kind of liquid formulation so that farmers need not go for trying just to open the top box and keep it, that's all. And again, formulation where we don't need any insecticide, that also we have developed. But usually what we do is we take the wooden chip and put 1 or 2 drops of insecticide, difluorovac. Now difluorovac is going to be banned, so we are advocating spinosad 1 drop and keep it in the field. So this attracts the males and kills. So the idea is when we remove the males population, the females are becoming virgin and there is no possibility of laying the egg, and finally the pest reduces. So this is the concept which we are using. So I am happy to say almost in the Karnataka and Andhra Pradesh, more than 10 to 15% of mango farmers have started using this. And again, we are getting very much demand for the guava farmers. And one more thing is what we see, this is just the result which we have developed. So here you can see the control is only methyl-eugenol. We have used 10 traps, and here we have used our product, which is only 5 traps. You can see the number of males we have received in the traps. So it is almost like more than 3 times or 4 times we get it. So what we have done is now we are recommending, we have also developed a bisexual attractant. This is based on some kind of fermenting products. So here it's very simple technology. So now what we are telling is instead of going for 10 traps, you use 5 traps of methyl-eugenol and another 5 traps of our bisexual attractant. Here the number of males, the number of flies we are getting is less, but the proportion of females is very high. We get up to more than 40 to 50%. So the combination of this in 5-5, it gives very good results. So especially in people from Karnataka know Coorg mandarin. Coorg mandarin is a very indigenous mandarin which doesn't come to the market because Coorg people are very proud to present, gift this mandarin to their neighbors. So one farmer came to me just to want to know about 3-4 years back, and he said, I have fruit fly. Then I gave this formulations. He was very happy because immediately all his laborers were able to see some trap and they were very excited to see that. Then we continued this for 3-4 years. So last year, he had more than 2 tons of oranges, which they don't market. It is only for the friends. And in the neighborings, they don't have any yield at all, very low yield, not even 100 kgs. And the main reason is the reason which we are always thinking it is a citrus decline. It is not citrus decline. The early stages, the fruit flies are coming and infesting these fruits, and there is a fruit drop because of the fruit fly infestation. That I think it was not noticed. Once they used these traps, they got excellent result. And of course, he brought almost like 15-20 kgs to us and gave it free of cost. He said, you have to take it. But then I told him, rather than that, I want you to act as a spokesperson and tell the others that this is working. So now this is also perking up. Yesterday also somebody called me for this. Then Leptospira invasa, this is the series galvas, which is earlier in southern India, now it has spread to even the eucalyptus regions. So here it is a gall forming hymenopteran insect. So we have also developed a trap with this, and the advantage is this is isofemales. So it doesn't have males at all. So whatever we are trapping is the females. So we are straight away removing the egg laying and the further infestation. So this is, of course, this is not from our studies. This is from Australia. They have developed a female attractant for Helicoverpa, and you can see the colors here. So this, they don't spray the whole plot. They only have some rows, say for 1 row for 72 rows, or 1 row for 144 rows, depending on the area where they are studying. They just allow this trap, and all the moths, female moths, are attracted and they will come and touch it and they kill. So this again they are recommending. So this usually is reduced. Of course, this is not directly as a semiochemicals, because this is a repellent which we have already developed for mango borer. mango stem borer. So what we do is we allow the farmers to go for cleaning this and to give it. And this is also picking up, and we have seen very good action by this. So this is just an example to show how the pheromone can be integrated in the BIPM practices. So this study we have done for the recently invaded fall armyworm Spodoptera fergipoda. So what we have done is we have used almost 10 traps to 15 traps per acre immediately 20 days after the maize is transplanted. Then again we have allowed release of Trichogramma prettiosum or Trichogramma chilonis, or even sometimes Telinomus. So again, we are recommended for almost 4 releases. Then if they need if the pest is little more, they can go for 1 spray of neem oil or even any neem formulations. Then BT spray, because that is to take care of the young larvae, or Metarhizium. So together with, we have got very good result. This the last time we have conducted a demonstration of 35 acres in a place near Bangalore. And this Rabi also trial is going on with an excellent result, because usually we feel the sweet corn, the farmers don't want to leave it because the cost of seed is very high. But here we have proved that even in sweet corn, we can easily manage with this kind of integrated packages. So this is another method, which is auto fusion. Of course, this was purchased by a company. Of course, it has not come into the market so far. The idea is make the male as a female. So what they do is they have a hydrophobic formulation of a test of pheromone. So the males, they will come first and they will rest on this. So once they sit on that, they get coated with the pheromone. So then they become females, and once it flies, all the males will follow, and finally mating destruction is effected. But this technology is already been purchased by a company, but somehow it has not come into the market. This I don't know what is the reason for that. This is the potential of Europe pheromone market. So in 2025, we project almost like 5.7 billion US dollars. Now it is in 2019, it is 2.4 billion. So Indian companies are having very good market share in that. So we don't know about it, but they have very good market share. So many pheromones are being exported from India. We had pheromone for Tuto absoluta before the Tuta entered. We had pheromone for Spodoptera fergipoda before the Spodoptera fergipoda entered. So the pheromone technology is available, and it has a very good market potential. We will try to utilize this. Of course, I have told the plus points about what are the minus points. So for some insects, still we find, especially the beetles, mealybugs, thrips, hoppers, we need to study more on the pheromones or even the chiromones, so that we can go for eco-friendly management. So this already thrips and hoppers we are doing based on the plant volatiles, because sometimes difficult to study on the pheromones. So we are working on the chiromones. So we have got very good lead. So of course, some more studies are needed. As I told you, female moth attractant. So I am happy to say that recently one of my students has done one study on the tomato volatiles for attracting Tuta macellata. So it has given very good result. So though the numbers is less than pheromone, but the catches has a very good proportion of females. More than 50%, more than 40 to 50% females we have contacted. Then invasives. So we have a kind of repository for pheromones for the impending invasives. That is very important. Then this is simplification of pathways. That is the job of organic chemists. So I know there are some companies. Earlier we used to import pheromone, 1 kg of pheromone, spending more than 1 lakh or 1.5 lakhs. Now the pheromone is produced even for the cost of 8,000 rupees per kg. So in India itself it is produced and it is sent to abroad, because they use the cold synthesis method. I don't know much about it because it's a chemistry job. But the idea is that it can work very nice. Then again, the adsorbents, which already we have started working on the nano materials, and soon we will find it is replacing the Reposeptal. Then for mating disruption, as I told you, we are bringing out with cost-effective formulation. So for mating disruption to become success, we have to go for area-wide management. Means take a village level. And one farmer gave me a very excellent idea how to go about the pheromones, especially the parapheromone for mango. He said, start with circles. Start with circles, together you match. That means village level, all the farmers should be encouraged. Maybe you can take the State Department help, give a subsidized pheromone or those kind of things, so that in the village level adoption, if it starts, usually within 2-3 years, we will see the pest becomes negligible. So we do not worry about it. And again, I always say semiochemical research is little long-term research, because sometimes we end up in something, we don't end up in something. My friend Ganesh is here, Nivapura is there. We started with Maruka with Tetra, we didn't land up in a place, because the same thing which Dr. Agarwala was mentioning, if you go by the literature available, where they say it is working very efficiently, but in India it never worked. So maybe the geographical population or something is there. So because of that, the students are not able to come, they don't come up and take up semiochemical research, because it takes long time. It's almost 3-4 years it takes, but still some students I have got, and of course 2 students completed PhD in me. And again, we need a different funding. Of course, ICR initially there was a proposal to develop a separate institute for semiochemical research, but somehow it is dropped. And again, the farmers should be made aware of the pheromone use. Then it has to come along with the package of practices. Each crop, each pest, we have pheromones. So how to incorporate that? I think as a scientist, we have to influence the policymakers and say it is included. And again, registration issue is there, because this is coming under insecticide act when we use it for the mating disruption. So this already a separate bill is being made for the Biopesticide Act. I think there this will be addressed. So when there is no kill of any insect, why it has to be in the Insecticide Act? So this is going on. I think soon we will see some good policy revision. Thank you very much. Thank you for your patience, lady. If you have any suggestions, I am happy to hear from you.
So thank you very much, sir, for your nice presentation. And this topic is actually very important in case of the pest management. So now, anybody, any queries?
Say in Manipur, rice is the main crop. And on one hand, our honorable Prime Minister is trying to develop Manipur and the Northeast India as Manipur and the Northeast India as organic state. But at present, farmers are facing problem on insect pest in this main crop. Stem moral and guess one. So related with your topic, that is pheromone technology, whether this technology can replace use of insecticide, or lots of fields are related by this two pests in the current system. So I like your solution on this.
Recently, day before yesterday, so we have developed different formulation for pheromone formulation for system. So this is already in the process of licensing a company on exclusive basis. So soon companies are there which have produced, especially for mass traffic benefits. And of course, for mating reception, again, we have the regulatory process. We have to again register under the Insecticide Act, and other things are there. It takes little more time.
For bootstrapping, that company will pay you. Again, you can contact me, and maybe within a few months it will be available, especially for the rice press, citrus leaf miner, of course, Spodoptera frugiforum, that is the maize palm, and the tomato leaf miner, and of course, Leuconodes, all the things we have. So you please write to us, we will enable us, either we will supply or we will give the person who can supply. Excellent most products we not that company is an international company, and their products are very good. So you and of course it is a part of IPM, so it doesn't take care of you. So we are only trying to stop the initial stages of mating, egg laying like that. So later, by mistake, there are chances of eggs being laid from other bees. So those things also we have to take care by going for an insecticide. But the overall, the insecticide load will be very much reduced, and also it the Japanicum clones are not very good parasites for the crisis ecosystem. Remember, Bacillus is recommended for farming. So this road also is effectively clone. In Andhra Pradesh, we have very good followers because they don't want insecticide. It is happening. So you contact us maybe an appropriate time. No. Thank you. Yes, sir.
Thank you, sir, for a presentation on every technologies that are coming up. This is not any query or anything, but I would like to just present before the house that the technology was there for several years. All the science of chemical ecology has been there for several years in the pest management strategies. In different crops, especially very popular in rice and I think sugar and other crops, which now is ready to the other crops and other ecological and pest situations, which I must say, as one of the colleagues of and one of the scientists of the National Bureau of Agricultural Resources, I must congratulate the group and Dr. Salah. The last few years, there has been a transformation. I must say, in a decade, there has been a tremendous transformation that very beautiful marriage to creativity, scientists, technologists, and commercial private public partnership. Because of the technology, it was probably not very given due importance, except for surveillance, for detection. And has now become more than the IPM program, if I'm right, sir. So what I think bringing to the notice of the house here is that it is a perfect example of technology. But the science has been strengthened behind the technology. Therefore, that's the job we have done very beautiful. And there is definitely always technologies to be supported by entrepreneurs, and in this case also there's a lot of entrepreneurship coming up, and I just don't want to do many other facts, but there's a lot of growth in this sector under the leadership of leadership, but especially leadership of group, and there's been a very big contribution and transformation. I'm not really talking about clear modes and parameters, which is almost 20 years, and I'm very happy that Europe has seen a situation this sort of clinical ecology that can be handled through use of this. With that, I thank the house for giving my speaking.
Thank you, Dr. Nagesh. Actually, my colleague, Dr. Subhakaran, is that can you get up? Dr. Deepa Bhagat. So we all have a team, so we are working on different aspects. So I am trying to find out what are the insects which we don't have very well.
how to identify and use them. They are all working on the nano particles, and she's also nano. So maybe in a day or two, it is not possible to come up, but maybe in the future we will have some technology. Thank you very much.
Actually, sir, in our Roadster region, the cyclists, so last time also, sir, I think you remember I have discussed with you, sir. So we are having the problem of the status trouble. Status trouble is one place, this is Alpine, which is moving the distance of the city. So if we can help us to work out in time.
See, Anapla Stigi, I collected some samples from here in the analyzed it, but I didn't get much of it. Only I was telling, as a science, see, a man comes to sexual maturity at a puberty, maybe at the age of 16, 17 years, and a moth becomes to sexual puberty on the same wavelength, it emerges. But bigger sexual intelligence is cerebral. Maybe it takes more because the life, if you take the period, maybe it takes almost 2.5 months it can live. So the period may be maybe 10th or 15th day. That is the thing, I think we missed it. Actually, we didn't find out the exact time we had to collect it. So if anybody wants to collaborate in this region, we are happy to do it. So we will also train you volunteers, and either you can inform the collector or you can send specimens. Specimens we will advocate because you don't want to other cities. So we will tell you how to collect the volunteers. You can come for a training or send your research. You can collect and send it to us. No problem. We'll try to analyze.
Okay, sir.
Thank you. Thank you for your patient hearing. Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
With Bhupendra, as sir will be leaving as he has some preoccupation. So I will request the organizer to felicitate Professor Momoja Singh. I will request
Actually,
Professor Baladevi.
All meeting. Okay.
It's an honor to honor you. Thank you. We'll meet.
So thank you, sir. And now again the session over to you.
So we will go to the next presentation is by my own colleague, Dr. Subhagaran. Dr. Subhagaran, as you know, is the, what do I say, is a budding chemical ecologist, all established chemical ecologist. He did his PhD and even postdoc from one of the best chemical laboratories in the world, Max Planck Institute. Then he has done on several assignments. So his contribution is always be remembered by the dispensers we have developed. So as I already we have told, we have developed a kind of nano dispenser. Different things are coming in the offing. So a scientist, how can he can also be a technologist. So he is the best example for that. So without spending much time, I ask Dr. Subhagaran to present this topic on insect attractants and repellents in agriculture and veterinary pest management. Dr. Subhagaran, please.
Good morning. Respected Chairman, thank you for your kind words. And at the outset, I would like to thank Dr. Nagesh and the team CAU Haldar for giving me an opportunity to come down over here and share my experience. And the good words have spoken just prior to the start of this lecture only keeps a big burden on our shoulders to fit into the shoe of that responsibility to me and Deepa, who are teaming up with Dr. Bhaktavachalam sir in this area of research. So I thank the compliments and also the good words spoken by Bhaktavachalam sir. Yes, of course, the whole Bible is right. Now I have to go in between the verses and try to do the best, because Bhaktavachalam has given the entire gamut of semiochemicals and beautifully structured, but a few gaps which have been addressed by us and all those things I'll be covering in my lecture. I've been talking on attractants and repellents in agriculture and veterinary pest management. Teaming up with me is Dr. Bhaktavachalam sir from India and Professor Ishwar from KMC and from India. To go back to what Bhaktavachalam sir said would be a repetition, but I would try to stick on to a few important aspects. As the IPM acceptance is on rise, a lot of new areas being brought into cultivation to produce clean and green food, the opportunities for non-conventional pest methods or approaches like your biocontrol agents or microbials or the biotechnological products or the chemoecological products are on rise. Everybody has a niche to play. Similarly, the chemical ecologists have a niche to play, and we are trying to bring in some strategies. We wouldn't say that we are the persons who are going to deliver a strategy that will solve the entire problem. We have a role to play, and we try to chip in our part into that so that the entire gamut of pest management is taken care of so as to produce a clean food. On that angle, the moment we speak about chemical ecology, we have to play around with the behavior. That's the ethology of the insect. And when we play around and we try to bring in either an attractant or a repellent, we try to put it into the market. Now, the moment it is put into the market, there are two aspects which is playing in the market. They are market drivers or market restraints. Drivers are interesting to me because they always help to propagate the technology. So more area is covered, better commerce is done, benefits the whole gamut of community. And if it's a market restraint, there are certain issues, either the synthetic or a route of synthesis is not pretty good. We may have to think about a new area, as Dr. Bhaktavachalam said. Or there are certain regulatory approvals. Some are maybe good, some may be trivial, but can be discussed across the table and sorted out, so it's not a big deal. So my talk will be focusing it well upon the chemoecological approaches. The moment you talk about chemoecological approaches, it deals with the long range and the short range. Long range is one which is pursued from a very long distance, and short range is mostly driven by vision and gustation, the moment it reaches there. And our lab focuses on long range cues, more specifically with relation to olfaction. The moment we speak of olfaction, it would be improper if we just jump into the topic. I know that learned entomologists and entomologists over here would be going, but I would love to start the talk with the volatile organic compounds that are floating in the environment, enters into the sensillae of the insect through small pores, gets stuck to the receptor, transforms into the chemical, the electrical signals, proceeds towards the brain to the higher center of learning, then brings in a desired action either to move or away from the source. Now there are gaps existing over here to the high level. There is still a debate happening at the second messenger level pathway. Okay, we leave that to the basic scientists to work on, and we go with the technology aspect. Now, the entire approach of my talk will be centered around both for repellents and for the attractants. First is to isolate and characterize the volatile organic compounds. And once the compounds are available, are they having a physiological response? And if they are having a physiological response, check them for the behavioral response. Then once you have the stuff in your hand, make the material and try to develop case studies whether there is a success or failure. And if everything suits good, we have another partner in the system, the bioagents of the microbials. Are we going to see compatibility with them, or is there any way we can complement? Because we have been thrown challenges like yesterday's lecture. We may have to rope in some of the concepts which were talked about into our system of research as a sort of a complementation. On that angle, first is how to get the best extracts. Either it's from the plant or from the insect. You need to have a robust technique to isolate the compounds that are available at nano or pico or control level. Majority of the times, many people are interested in clinical ecology, but they end up trying to take volatiles which are just immersing that in a solvent without even knowing whether they are polar or non-polar, and then trying to push the compound to a chemical ecologist, asking him to find out whether this is having an EAG response in the very negative field. That's too myopic approach. We may have to go a little bit in a step-by-step approach if we want to see the product at the end of the day. On that angle, the team at NVIDIA has specialized in volatile extraction. And also, the moment it is extracted, does the volatile have some physiological behavioral approach? And then we then take it to the next level to see if those compounds which is being collected from the environment or the headspace of either the plant or an insect, do they have the neuronal response causing that we use electrophysiology? But that's a very old technique. Of course, still people are very comfortable using that. The moment they get an amplitude shift in the puff that they give for an insect, they say that we have found out a pheromone. I'm sorry, that will be too misleading. There are other techniques which you have to use in tandem with the general electroangiography. We have been using coupling of the chemical detector, like you try to isolate the volatile from the plant or insect, but you don't know what they are. So you have to use a chemical detector. Chemical detector is nothing but your GC or a GCMS. And then you have to identify what are the compounds that is coming out from this chemical detectors, which are having physiological response in insect. So here we try to couple the chemical detectors with the electrophysiological equipments, and then you could pull out the compounds. Now, if you see, the black is the GC trace, the red one is the insect antennal response trace. You don't have to spend a lot of time. You can do it one shot, the chemical detection and the biological response, and pull out the compounds to which the physiological response or the neurons are responding. Does the job easy. But we have done one step further. We have tried to integrate the gas chromatography mass spec, because in the previous days, after the compound is identified to have a physiological response, again you have to take the compound and inject into MS and find out what that compound is. It's a too tedious job, and sometimes there will be a shift in the peaks that's coming out due to either the instrumentation fault or due to the parameters that you set in. Now we have done away with that problem. Job is getting easy now. Now, the moment you take the material from the plant, are they having any changes? Now, I have done a study long back, a decade back at Max Planck, where the moment herbivory happens on a plant, you have a lot of change in the volatile bouquet. A rose doesn't, for example, I take an analogy of a rose. Rose doesn't give a perfect fragrance or a bouquet of volatiles what it was giving continuously. The moment it has been subjected to a stress, either mechanical or physical, the bouquet of volatiles is going to shift. It is so high in certain plants where you can feel it. In certain few plants, it's so trivial, so small that you need to use certain techniques to identify it. Now, whenever an insect is damaging a plant, it sends out signals in terms of remove volatiles, telling that I am attacked. One thing is that it is advertising itself to the neighboring plant, telling that I am damaged, you get ready because you are the next to be damaged. Or it is trying to advertise itself to the natural enemies, telling that here there is an insect fellow who is trying to damage me. Why don't you come and attack me? So there are two-pronged approaches over there. And the shift of volatile doesn't happen only with the herbivory or mechanical damage. It also has a diurnal shift, because there are certain plants which are visited by the pollinators in the night. In such cases, vision is zero. You have to advertise yourself by the smell. And certain floral volatiles are high during the night. Can we exploit them also for pest management? On that angle, we have tried to work at a next higher level, rather than working at the whole antennae as such. What are the volatiles or the compounds present in the bouquet of volatiles, which is causing the neuronal response. We try to integrate another system, going at the cellular level using a single cell recording system, which is picking up over a period of time. A very tedious technique. It's easy to be said that because it is a backbreaking procedure. You have to go and touch the single neuron with your electrode. And without damaging the neuron, you have to keep it in contact for quite a long time, maybe 1 to 1.5 hours. It's really damaged. It's almost like a surgical procedure. And get those neurons fired for a compound of neuron. But when all this pain is done, it's worth it because the top trace, black trace, is a volatile extract from a plant, and that has been subjected to the neuronal response. 3 different neurons we have taken from 3 different cells. You see the spikes happening for 3 different neurons in 3 different ways. Meaning to say that there is one neuron having receptor for 3 or 4 compounds, there is another neuron has only for 2, another neuron for 2 also. So we try to map the locations where these neurons are, and you could do for a further piece of research. Similarly, how do we use them for our pest management? Here I would say, while doing such exercise, we did stumble upon one neuron, wherein it was responding to the frass volatiles of the insect. There, across the entire animal, because antennae consist of 80, in few insects it's having only 30 annuli, in some insects you have 80 annuli, bigger something. Each annuli has got around 800 to 1200 sensilla, and very few sensilla, 1 or 2 are very specifically tuned for the frass volatiles. Now you see that this is a single cell recording. The amount of spike that has happened for a particular compound. Now, when we find out what that compound is nothing but the volatiles coming out from the frass. Now, this frass volatile can be exploited for pest management, as we had done some experiments. Mandukar sexta is called as a hawkmoth, feeds voraciously. Overnight, it can finish off the entire plant. The mother of that particular larvae has to be very picky in trying to lay the eggs in places where there is no conspecific larvae, because if it goes and lays the eggs in the same plant, certainly the younger one cannot develop because there will not be enough food in a day or 2. So mother uses this odor that is coming out from the frass to selectively avoid plants to lay their eggs. Can't we not take this cue?